What's going on, guys? It's Nick here, back with another video. We're going to be going over every backfield today, talking about which running backs I'd be starting and sitting. But before we do that, have to start things off as usual. The stat of the day. Yesterday's stat was among the top 10 wide receivers in air yards per game. 8 of them rank inside the top 20 in fantasy points per game. I said name one of the 2 who do not fall inside the top 20. And the answers are AJ Green and Marquise Brown, and Connor McLeod, I don't know how you say the name, but Connor McLeod and Joe Haynes were the first to get those 2 right. Today's stat, among running backs with over 75 carries on the season, who has seen the highest percentage of runs when facing 8 or more defenders in the box? And one last thing before we start, remember that I answer your questions in the Saturday video. So if you have questions for this week, put them in the comment section of this video so I can see them before the Saturday video. And you don't need to mention cornerback wide receiver matchups. That's going to be a weekly segment, so you can ask for it if you want, but I'm already doing it, so you don't need to ask. All right, so first up, we've got the Thursday night game between the Packers and the 49ers. Maybe. I really don't know at this point if this game's going to happen. It just came out today that the 49ers are shutting down their facility because of COVID, and so it's possible, given this game's on Thursday, do they flex it to Sunday? Do they flex it to Monday, to Tuesday, to later in the season? I don't know. This is very new. I will break this down in case it happens, but if it's not going to happen, skip right to the next part. And you can see the timestamps in the bottom of the screen along where you'd move across the time. It's going to tell you exactly when different matchups are, and so if the game's not happening, move to the next one. But this game has a 50-point over-under. Packers opened as 3.5-point favorites. It's been bet up to 5.5 points, so Vegas is favoring the Packers a little bit more. On the Packers side, it's looking possible that Aaron Jones will miss another week. They're being very cautious with that. We already know Jamal Williams is out, A.J. Dillon is out, and so they're going to be down to Dexter Williams and Tyler Irving. If Jones is out, then expect Williams to get the bulk of the carries and Irving to be more of the passing down back. However, I would find it very difficult to trust either of them, since the Packers could easily just throw the ball more. I mean, if these are the 2 you're leaning on, and you're still facing, even without Garoppolo, without Kittle, this is still a good team, and without Kendrick Bourne as well. So it's still a good team. I would think that they're going to throw the ball, but maybe they don't. So I would say Williams over Irvin, but both of them, I really feel like it's more of a desperation play. Definitely not 10-team leagues. I'd feel pretty bad about my team if I'm starting them in a 12-team league. With 14-team leagues, I guess you can start thinking about it. For the 49ers, I mean, I don't know exactly who's going to test positive. I know Bourne has. He's not going to be playing, but he's not a running back. We also have a bunch of injuries. There's so much unknown in this game. We've got Mostert, Wilson, and Coleman are all going to be out. The backfield would probably be coming down to Hasty and McKinnon, in which case, like last week, we'd expect Hasty to get more of the carries, McKinnon to be used more on passing downs if they're trailing in the game, which is definitely possible. Maybe they use McKinnon more if a bunch of wide receivers are out and they have no one to throw to. You got to have someone out there who can catch passes, and we know McKinnon is solid in that area. So I really think this game's going to come down to, does it play? Which, honestly, thinking about it right now, I feel like it's not going to play on Thursday. And then if it doesn't play, when does it play? Does it even play this week? And then if it does play this week, is Aaron Jones playing in the game, or is he still need more time to recover? Are too many players in the 49ers out with COVID, and we've got these weird players playing? It's a complete mess right now. And so honestly, for this one, just watch the rankings, just watch the news that comes out surrounding this game, and adjust from there. I don't think we could possibly have enough information right now to make a good guess. Next up, the rest of these games we should have a much better indication on. We've got Bears traveling to Tennessee to take on the Titans. This game has a pretty average 46.5-point total, and the Titans are 5.5-point home favorites. For the Bears, Dave Montgomery continues to see around 20 touches a game. He's getting over 80% of the snaps. He continues to be very inefficient with those touches, but any running back getting 20 touches a game with goal line work, with passing down work, I mean, you're running back 2. And so I do think he's a high-end running back 2 this week. The matchup isn't great as a road underdog, but, this isn't a horrible spot against a Titans run defense that isn't overly impressive. It's pretty neutral. And so I think you got David Montgomery. You're getting all these touches. You're getting this work in the receiving game. You pretty much have to be playing him as a high-end 2. The Titans, you know what to do. Always start Derrick Henry and no one else. Next up, we've got Lions at Vikings, and this game has a pretty high 52.5 point total, and the Vikings are 4-point home favorites in this one. For the Lions, I mentioned earlier this week that Swift saw his highest snap share of the season last week at 62%, compared to just 12 total snaps for Adrian Peterson. The results weren't there for either of these guys since the Lions got crushed and they couldn't do anything against the Colts defense, but that sort of split is very encouraging. Swift still has a very, very low floor and probably one of the lowest floors among any running back too. And I don't think that, like, regardless of matchup you're playing Swift, I still think he needs a solid matchup to be playing him. This week, I would consider him a low-end running back too, just one with, like I said, one of the lowest possible floors. The Vikings are not an elite run defense. This game, like I said, has a pretty high total, so points going to be scored. I did say the Vikings are favored, and so the projected game script favors Swift over Peterson. They would lean more on Peterson if they were winning the game. They lean more on Swift if they're losing, and like I said, they're projected to lose, and so we're projecting maybe not that many carries for Swift, but we want targets more than carries anyways, and so if he's going to get 5 or 6 targets maybe in this one, he could be viable. Again, I would probably stay away from Swift in a 10-team league. In a 12-team league, low end 2, kind of where he's at. 14-teamer, you're probably starting Swift. Peterson, I definitely would not start him in a 10 or a 12-team league. And in a 14-team league, you're still just praying for a touchdown. And so could that happen? Yeah. Will it happen? I don't know. I'd say there's less than 50% chance. For the Vikings, pretty easy. Always start Dalvin Cook. He's my running back 1 overall on the week, right ahead of Alvin Kamara. Next up, we've got the New York Giants traveling to the Washington football team. This game has a very low 42-point total. Should be a gross one. And the football team is currently a field goal home favorite. On the Giants side, Freeman was out last week, and they used the rotation of Gallman, Dion Lewis, and Alfred Morris. Gallman looked like the best running back, but he still only played 43% of the snaps. I was very confused by that. Alfred Morris clearly does not look good. Dion Lewis can't be used on the ground, and so you would think they'd use Gallman more, but they decided not to. The matchup isn't the best. The Giants are road underdogs. The total is low. The football team has allowed the 4th fewest fantasy points to opposing running backs, thanks to their fantastic front 7. So I would prefer to just not play any Giants running back. And that would be especially true if Freeman returns. If Freeman's out, you could use Gallman in the flex if you really needed to. But if Freeman is back, I'd just bench everyone. For Washington, we see Gibson getting 17, 16, 13, and 20 touches over the last month. That's really nice volume. He's getting work in the receiving game. He's getting goal line work. That's really nice. We see McKissick getting 9, 7, 14, and 7 touches. But the majority of his touches are coming through the air. So it's not like he's getting, 9 carries in 1 target. He's getting like 1 carry and a bunch of targets, which is better in fantasy. That's not to say you have to start McKissick, but it's to say don't just look at 7 touches and be like, oh, can't start someone getting 7 touches. Well, if 6 of them are receptions, you can in a full PPR league. I would say that he's still more of a low-end flex play, and I would really only play him in a full PPR league, talking about McKissick there. And then for Gibson, the matchup against the Giants is like neutral to slightly below average because the Giants do have a better run defense than most people think, and the total is pretty low in this game, even if Washington was home favorites. But I would still, given the volume, given that it's not a horrible matchup, and they are still favorites, I still have Gibson as a high-end running back too because of what I talked about. He's going to get the carries, he's going to get some targets, he's going to get the goal line work if they can make it there, and so he's a solid play this week. You do not have to be in a full PPR league to play him. Next up, we've got a great game between Seattle and Buffalo. The Bills are 3-point home underdogs, so Seahawks are favored in this one, and this game has the highest total in the week at 55 points. Should be a really, really fun game to watch. For Seattle, everything depends on health. We have Carson and Hyde missing last week, and so they leaned on rookie DJ Dallas. He played 79% of the snaps. He saw virtually all of the running back touches. He is a great play if we have the same setup as last week. Will we? It's still too early to tell. You've got to watch tweets from Adam Schefter. You've got to look at Sleeper, Roto World. You got to just look at the news, see who's playing, because last week DJ Dallas turned into a really nice play. I think I talked about, was it this video? Is it this video, the Saturday video last week, where I mentioned that I added Dallas in my 14-team league because I needed a running back, and it was basically a hedge saying I'm pretty sure at least one of Carson or Hyde's going to be out. And if both are out, Dallas is a great play. And so that kind of saved me. I was going to win anyways, but that kind of saved my running back 2 spot. But this week, it's the same thing. I mean, it's not like anything's going to change. If these guys are out, Dallas is still a solid play. However, it could be back. And if like Carson returns or Hyde returns, that kind of muddies the water, and we kind of need to see what we're expecting to happen. So just watch the rankings as I change them, because I'm going to be watching the news and I'll change them accordingly. The Bills don't have like a dreadful defense or anything, but they can be attacked on the ground. And so again, if Carson and Hyde are out and they only have Dallas and Homer, I really do think Dallas is a solid running back 2. And again, we'll need to reevaluate if one of those two are active. For the Bills, we saw Zach Moss play 3 more snaps than Singletary. He handled 1 more touch. And most importantly, Moss got nearly all of the red zone work, and he was who they leaned on at the goal line, and it resulted in 2 touchdowns for Moss, 0 for Singletary, something we have just seen a trend for Singletary over these last 2 seasons. They do not want to use Singletary when they get close to the end zone. It is going to be Josh Allen and Zach Moss who touch the ball in that range, and that really caps the upside and really lowers the floor of Singletary. When they're both active, I find it very difficult to trust Singletary since, like I talked about, lower floor, lower ceiling. And because of that, I'm ultimately ranking Singletary as more of a low-end flex play this week. And then Moss still, I think, is a flex play because while he is going to have more upside in the receiving game, he is going to have much more upside in the touchdowns, they're still split. And Seattle is a pass farm. So they have a decent run defense and a not so good pass defense. So I could definitely see a scenario where the Bills decide, hey, we're going to lean on the pass game. We're going to exploit this matchup with our wide receivers. That's how we're going to get yards. And if you also have running backs splitting time and getting less total volume than usual, you're only relying on touchdowns. And so that's why Moss is more viable this week. I think you can use him in the flex, and Singletary is less viable. But again, if they lean pass heavy, then that hurts the running backs unless they're going to throw to them a bunch, which hasn't really been something that Josh Allen has done a ton in the past. He could, and it would still lean towards Zach Moss because he's better in that area, but know that if they throw the ball a ton, it's not as good for the running backs. Next up, we've got Ravens at Colts. This game is a 45-point over-under, and the Ravens are currently 2.5-point road favorites. For those Ravens, everything depends on Mark Ingram. If he's out again, then Dobbins and Edwards become much stronger plays. If he's active, then it returns to just a gross 3-man committee. The Colts have allowed the 3rd fewest fantasy points to opposing running backs. They rank 5th in rush defense DVOA, 2nd in yards per carry allowed. They are an elite run defense, a very good defense overall. So if Ingram's back, I'm not playing any of these running backs. If Ingram is out again, Dobbins should see enough work to be a low-end running back too, and then Gus will be a solid play in the flex. For both of them, you're still kind of relying on a touchdown. For the Colts, it depends on even more injury news. This is the theme of the week. It's going to depend on who is playing. We expect Jonathan Taylor to play, but if he were to miss, then Wilkins would be a much stronger play as a running back too, and Hines could be used in the flex. I'm assuming he's going to be active, and if that's the case, then they're going to use a committee, a hot hand approach. I would expect them to somewhat limit Jonathan Taylor's total touches because he's coming off this ankle injury. They've said it's very minor. I'm not concerned about it long term, but anyone who suffers an ankle injury, it's likely the team who was already in a committee is going to cap his touches. And so I would say if Taylor's out there, he's probably just a flex play, and then Hines and Taylor would also be low-end flex plays. And it's the same thing as a lot of teams. You're praying for a touchdown. If these guys don't score a touchdown, they're very unlikely to be fantasy viable. If they do score, well, they're going to be fantasy viable. So really just play the one you think is going to score. Taylor does have the most upside, but if they're going to cap his touches, it's not that much upside. So could I see a scenario where I bench Jonathan Taylor? Right now I am in a league that I have. 14-team league. I have enough depth at the running back position. I have Edmonds, Gibson, and James Robinson. And then we have 2 flex spots, but I'm playing a wide receiver in that second flex spot. I am benching Jonathan Taylor. And so you can do it. Again, you can bench flex plays, and I have him as a flex play. Next up, we've got Panthers at Chiefs. This game has a 52.5-point total, and the Chiefs are massive 10.5-point home favorites. For the Panthers, we are expecting Christian McCaffrey to be back. How much they will use him is the question. Until I hear differently, I am assuming he'll be close enough to his usual workload to where you are trusting him as a running back one. That doesn't mean that Mike Davis won't be used, because he will be used. But if you have Christian McCaffrey and he's out there, you're playing him. The Panthers are big road dogs, but the Chiefs are attackable on the ground, and this is Christian McCaffrey. So you're putting him in your lineup if he's active. If you own Mike Davis, this is absolutely not a spot that you need to play him in. I mean, even if McCaffrey were out, this is still a difficult matchup. The Chiefs are an awesome defense overall, and they're expected to crush them, which is not good for running backs. And so I do think if you're in a deeper format, say 14, 16 team leagues, Mike Davis would be fine in the flex if McCaffrey is back. In a 10 to 12 team league, I would just hope you have better options. For the Chiefs, last week we saw Clyde handle 9 touches on 50% of the snaps, while Bell had 9 touches on just 26% of the snaps. Both had exactly 6 carries, 3 targets, 3 receptions, and so this is kind of a 50-50 split. Could it change this week? Absolutely. We don't know their long-term plans with Bell. This is a fantastic matchup, though, and so even if we're expecting a 50-50 split, I mean, they could both do well. The Panthers have allowed the 4th most fantasy points per game to opposing running backs. They rank 26th in rush defense DVOA, 20th in yards per carry allowed. Because of the matchup and because the Chiefs are such heavy home favorites, I have Bell as a low-end running back 2 and Clyde as a high-end running back 2. Both are going to rely on touchdowns to make their fantasy days, but the Chiefs are projected to score 3 more points than any other team in the week at nearly 32 points, and so both of them do have a decent chance at scoring. Next up, we got the Houston Texans taking on the Jacksonville Jaguars. This game is a 50.5 point total, and the Texans are 7-point road favorites. For the Texans, this is a great spot for David Johnson. The Jaguars have one of the worst run defenses in the league, and Johnson has been seeing nearly 20 touches per game. I would be starting him as a low-end running back 1 this week. For the Jaguars, James Robinson has been incredible this season, both on the ground and through the air. They're going through a quarterback change, and they are projected to lose, but this matchup is amazing. The Texans are just awful on the ground. Their run defense is one of the worst in the league, and so you're starting James Robinson everywhere. Broncos at Falcons is up next. This game is a 50-point total, and the Falcons are 3.5-point home favorites. For the Broncos, Lindsey and Gordon were in a 45-55 split in favor of Gordon last week, and that is something I would kind of expect on average. Maybe we get closer to 50-50 as Lindsey works his way back from injury and concussion, but I would think we're roughly in that 45 to 50% range for Lindsey and 50 to 55% range for Gordon. Last week, that resulted in 7 touches for Lindsey, 14 for Gordon. With Gordon seeing more work in the passing game, I would be careful looking at this matchup. I think a lot of people see Falcons defense and think, ooh, nice, this is a great matchup for the running game. It is not. The Falcons have a solid run defense, and they've allowed a below average amount of fantasy points to opposing running backs while ranking 8th in rush defense DVOA, 6th in yards per carry allowed. So because the matchup isn't great, these two are also splitting the work. That's not great. I would lean Gordon over Lindsey because Gordon is getting more work in the receiving game. But with Gordon really just being a low end 2 and Lindsey being viable in the flex, but not someone you need to start, you are fine benching Lindsey this week. For the Falcons, it is a slightly below average matchup. I'm not going to say the Broncos are just an elite defense. They're not. They're a solid defense, but it's slightly below average matchup for the Falcons. They are home favorites, so that's good, but the Broncos, again, have a good enough defense to where it's kind of even out, and Gurley is just the only one you would want. You're not trusting Brian Hill right now. He's not getting enough consistent volume. He's not getting enough work near the goal line. Gurley gets all that work near the goal line, and so he's the most likely to score. He's got a good chance of scoring, especially with Ridley likely out. They're going to have to lean on Gurley a little bit more, but he's still very difficult to trust. I do still have him as like a mid to high end running back 2 this week because he scored so many touchdowns on the year, and he's probably going to score another touchdown this week. Just know that if he doesn't score, he's probably only getting you 5 to 6 points. So he's got a much lower floor than most people in that range. Next up, we've got the Raiders at the Chargers. This game is a 53-point total, and the Chargers are currently 1-point home favorites. For the Raiders, always start Josh Jacobs. For the Chargers, we've got a bit of a mess. Tremaine Pope played ahead of Joshua Kelly last week, which was pretty confusing, but neither of them got enough work to be viable. Neither of them are running backs I would trust. Justin Jackson has seen his volume go up and down, but I still feel the most confident that he's going to see his touches. The Raiders have allowed the 5th most fantasy points per game to opposing running backs, and so if we had one lead back, it would be a great spot, but having a committee isn't great. I have Joshua Kelly, not as someone you could really start. Tremaine Pope, not as someone you can really start. But Jackson as like a mid-range running back 2 because I feel best about his volume. And if he can get the same work in the receiving game, he's going to have a decently high floor. Steelers at Broncos is up next. This game has a very low 41.5 point total. And the Steelers are massive 13.5 point road favorites. For the Steelers, this is a smash spot for James Conner, so I'd make sure to play him everywhere. For the Cowboys, usually Zeke is a must start, but despite the heavy volume, the Cowboys just can't seem to move the ball. They can't seem to score touchdowns, and so you've got this very, very difficult matchup. I do still think the volume makes Zeke like a mid to high end running back 2 this week, but if you have multiple running back 1s, you've got some high end running back 2s, I am okay benching Zeke. Because again, matchup can't get much worse than playing the Steelers. They're an awesome defense overall. The Cowboys could legitimately score 3 points this week, and so it's not a great situation for the running back. Again, they're going to lean on him a ton. He's going to get a ton of touches. Can he do something with those? That's the question. Miami at Arizona is up next. This game has a 47.5 point total, and the Cardinals are 4.5 point home favorites. For the Dolphins, Gaskin has been the feature back, but he's out for a few weeks, and that should result in both Breida and Jordan Howard being active this week, which is really annoying for fantasy because Howard is really only good for stealing 1-yard touchdowns. I would have a very, very difficult time starting either of them. I don't trust this run game outside of Gaskin, but Breida would be the top option if you were desperate to play a running back on this team. Again, I'd probably just do that in like a 14-team or 16-team league. For the Cardinals, Drake is expected to miss this week, which means that we should see Edmonds take over the featured role. There's a chance Eno Benjamin plays a little more than we would like, but Edmonds should still be a lock and load running back 1 while Drake is out and you're playing him this week. Saints at Bucks is next up. This game is one of the ones I'm looking forward to most on the week, and hopefully it does not disappoint us. The over-under is set at 51.5 points, and the Bucks are currently 5-point home favorites. For the Saints, it is a brutal matchup, but you're always starting Alvin Kamara, and I would leave Latavius Murray on the bench. For the Bucks, Ronald Jones was benched after last week's fumble, but then he kind of came back at different points, and I think this is more of a weak benching. Maybe they shift more workload over to Fournette in total, but it's not like he's not going to see a touch this week. They benched him, they brought him back in after the half, and then he didn't get too much work after that. They still leaned on Fournette when they needed to run the clock out because Ronald Jones fumbled, and that's just what coaches do. I would say that Fournette had already kind of been taking over the workload the week before, and they took over a little bit more this week, so he's the one I would trust more. The Saints also have one of the best run defenses in the league, so if you're playing Ronald Jones, it's only in the flex, and you got to understand the floor is 2, 3, 4 points. I'd prefer to bench him, honestly. Fournette can be used as a low-end 2 or flex play as well. I'd feel more confident in him, more confident in not only his floor but his upside. But this is still a split backfield against the Saints, a fantastic run defense. They've allowed the 6th fewest fantasy points per game to opposing running backs. They rank 4th in rush defense CWA, 3rd in yards per carry allowed. So this is not a spot to attack. And so if you don't need to play these guys, I wouldn't. Final game of the week is Monday Night Football, where the Patriots will take on the Jets. This game has a very low 42.5 point total, although it is up. I believe it opened at 41 points, and the Patriots are 7-point road favorites. For the Patriots, Damian Harris is the only running back you can realistically trust, and even he is just super, super fringy as a play. His floor is 1 or 2 points, and he's going to need a touchdown to be viable. I would prefer to bench all Patriots running backs. In a full PPR league, you could play James White in the flex. But in general, honestly, this entire game I would like to avoid. We don't play Frank Gore. You could play LaMichael Pirine in the flex in a deeper format, 14, 16 team leagues. But realistically, For most of you, you're in 10, 12, 18 leagues. I don't think you're playing any running back in this game. If you need to, it is probably Damian Harris because he's the most likely to get this early down work, get this goal line work, and he's the most talented running back on the Patriots. And so he's got the clearest path to 100 and a touchdown, but he's probably not going to have many receptions, if any receptions. The Jets have a solid run defense. They get run on a lot because they lose every game, but their defense isn't horrible. And then we know Cam Newton's going to steal a lot of goal line touches. And so I'd prefer every single running back in this game to bench, but it would be Damian Harris, then LaMichael Pirine, then James White in a full PPR league, and honestly, there's no way you're starting anyone else. So that's a breakdown of every backfield in week 9. If you want to see my exact rankings on every player, you can check that out at our website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com. That's the end of this one. Hope you all did enjoy. If you did, then how about hitting that like button, and how about subscribing to the channel if you're new? Thanks for watching.